Hello everyone, this is Cyril Gruder. I'm a biological anthropologist, and today I'm going to talk to you about physical traits that make men attractive. And as usual in these videos, let's put on our evolutionary glasses to examine this fascinating question. So let me give you a little bit of background first. Darwin identified two mechanisms by which evolution could occur. There's natural selection, which makes an individual more adapted to an environment. For example, it may make that individual better at finding food, and it increases that individual's survival. But then there's also sexual selection. And Darwin realized that features like the peacock's tail were a serious disadvantage to the animal in terms of survival. The tail of the peacock, for example, may make it difficult for the animal to fly and to escape quickly from predators. So he proposed that these traits had evolved because they were of advantage in the game of competition for mates. And he called that process sexual selection. Now, Darwin identified two major processes of sexual selection. On the one hand, there's male-male competition, which favors traits that enable males to outcompete rivals for mating opportunities with females. And male-male competition can lead to weapons such as antlers, but also ornaments that may provide information on the social status and fighting ability of a rival. And then on the other side, there's female choice. So that's the other process of sexual selection. Female choice favors traits that make males more attractive to females. For example, long tail feathers, as we see in many birds. So these are essentially billboards for females. Now here's an example of a male ornament. These are black and white snub-nosed monkeys. They have these luscious red lips, which is a natural lipstick of sorts. And my collaborators and I, we measured the redness of the lips of both harem holders who have access to females and bachelor males who don't have access to females. And we found that the lips of the harem holders were much redder than those of the bachelor males, especially during the mating season. So in essence, we found that the higher the status, the redder the lips. So these lips seem to be a sexually selected trait that signal status. Now, one obvious example of a sexually selected trait in humans is the beard. It has no apparent survival value. Women and children are perfectly fine without beards, so it's unlikely that natural selection is responsible for the evolution of beards. Now, the question is, did beards evolve via female choice as an attractive masculine adornment, or did they evolve via male-male competition as a signal of status and dominance? In this study, which was done in New Zealand and Samoa, women did not rate bearded male faces as more attractive than clean-shaven faces. But women, and also men, judged bearded faces to be older, and they also ascribed them a higher social status. So the conclusion of this study was that the human beard evolved primarily via male-male competition and may signal dominance. And here's another sexually selected trait, the voice. Men typically have deeper voices than women, and men's voices break at puberty, but women's don't. And there is experimental evidence that women find male voices with a deeper pitch more attractive. And the male upper torso is probably also sexually selected. In men, shoulders, upper body musculature, and the biceps are more developed than in women. And there are studies showing that men with more fat-free muscle mass are more attractive and have more sexual partners. But there's also some studies that find that females prefer moderately developed male torsos more than extremely muscular types. And there's some studies that suggest that height is a sexually selected trait. According to these studies, taller men are perceived as being of higher status. They have an occupational advantage. They receive better pay and fill higher status positions. They're perceived as more desirable dates, and they also date more often. So given all of this, you would expect to see an effect of height on fitness. And by fitness, I mean reproductive success, having children. Now, in this study here, which was done in Poland, men who had children were significantly taller than those who did not reproduce. And we see that for all age categories. So if you look at the graph here, you can see that irrespective of age, men with children were significantly taller than those without. And the power of height can also be seen in the selection or election of US presidents. So if you look at the heights of all the winners and losers of US presidential elections, you can see that the taller candidate won more than 80% of the time. And what about the penis? In this study here, which was done in China, average size penises were most attractive. But in a separate study that was done a little bit later in a different population, they found that larger penises were considered more attractive. So here the conclusion was bigger is better. But whether a given penis size was preferred also depended on a man's body shape and body height. So as far as the penis is concerned, the jury is still out. These conflicting findings show that a single study is rarely fully conclusive, and there's also important cross-cultural variation when it comes to preferences for certain physiques. So what sorts of facial features do women prefer in men? Often people say more masculine features, for example, a large prominent chin, but preferences for masculinity actually vary depending on whether a woman is seeking a long-term or short-term partner. In this study, they used computer graphics to transform between feminine and masculine versions of individual male faces, and they found that preferences for masculinity increased when women considered a short-term relationship. And these preferences are potentially adaptive, because men with masculine faces often have good genes and a strong immune system. The kids may get these benefits as well, right? But when women consider a long-term relationship, they prefer more feminine male faces. And that's because more masculine men may show less paternal investment. And when you look for a long-term partner, you want to be sure that you've got someone who's committed to the family and the kids. And this is another classic study. In this study, they found that women prefer more masculinized faces around the time of ovulation, but more feminized faces at other times. So how do we interpret this finding? Well, evolutionary biologists say that women prefer cues that are indicative of good genes when they are likely to conceive, but cues of nurturing and parental investment otherwise. I should also mention here that some subsequent studies did not find a link between a woman's hormonal status and her preferences for masculinity, so it's not quite clear how robust this finding actually is. And the last thing I want to mention is this guy here, Jeffrey Miller. He's the leading proponent of a theory that men's brains and creativity are designed to attract females. So according to him, creativity is a demonstration of cognitive fitness. And this mating mind hypothesis offers an explanation for the evolution of things like humor, music, and poetry. So these are traits that do not have any obvious survival value. And Jeffrey Miller also notes how creativity, which can be measured in terms of, say, output of novels or sales of music, peaks at the period of peak fertility of young men. So the question is, do artistic displays make men more attractive to women? Well, there is plenty of anecdotal evidence that musicians, artists, and writers enjoy a large number of sexual partners. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.